Officer Batty told investigators.
I did think we had a city ordinance. I swore we had a city ordinance.
Okay.
That you weren't allowed to panhandle.
There was no visible doubt in his voice. Then quietly he asked,
Is asking for money, or another way to call it panhandling, in a public place, public sidewalk, is that a crime or a city ordinance violation?
Batty paused.
To my knowledge now, no.
That pause was the fracture. The detective moved forward, not louder, just narrower.
Did you tell him that if he does not provide ID identification, that he would go to jail?
Yes.
The detective didn't challenge intent. He challenged structure.
Why?
Because at the time I thought we had a crime.
This taps directly into cognitive dissonance theory, Festinger, 1957. A psychological pressure point where a person is forced to confront the contradiction between what they believed and what the facts prove. Batty believed authority and assumption would hold his version together. He didn't expect the detective to dismantle it using his own words, in sequence, without confrontation. But the real questions remain. Who was the man standing on that sidewalk? What truly happened on December 14th, 2021? Welcome, or welcome back, to my channel. Your single comment means more than you think. On December 14th, 2021, at approximately 7:27 p.m., a routine evening unfolded along Canal Street in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. A mild winter evening settled over the historic downtown. It was calm until a routine call shifted the tone of the night. Dispatch reported a suspicious person. On the sidewalk stood a lone man dressed in dark clothing, quietly holding a cardboard sign that read, "God bless the homeless vets." He wasn't shouting. He wasn't blocking anyone's path. He wasn't asking for money. He simply stood there, silent, still, and deliberate, exercising what he believed to be his constitutional right. Inside the restaurant, unease began to grow. Employees said customers felt uncomfortable. Someone suggested he was panhandling. Another claimed staff felt threatened. None of these accusations were confirmed, but perception quickly hardened into certainty. Officers arrived within minutes.
I want you up front.
She doesn't want anything.
The business.
What? She died for this?
Huh?
She died for this?
Why? They said you're asking the customers for money and stuff like that.
Oh, God bless the homeless.
Okay, well, they don't want you up front of the business.
I don't want you up in front of the business.
Okay, well, that's not how this is
So
going
you
to
can
go.
go get in your car and leave.
No.
I'll give you 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have a nice night.
The encounter began calmly. Questions, explanations, polite requests. But when the man refused to move and declined to provide identification, the dynamic shifted.
I'm not identifying myself.
So you're going to end up
All
going
right.
to jail.
I told him my name is Jeff, and that's all I'm giving you.
Hey, no, if you want to give us your information, then that's fine. But we still have to.
Am I being
identify
detained
you.
at this point?
Yes,
For what?
for the identification of you, which is an investigation that they started.
Okay, I'm not giving any identification. I'd like to remain silent.
Okay. At this point, you're being detained. Okay. So, let me see this. Do you have anything in your pockets that'll poke, stab, or anything?
Since you're asking if I have anything in my pockets, I am armed lawfully.
Okay.
Concealed carry permit.
Okay. Where's it at?
Here's my hands. It's in my pocket.
In your front pocket?
Yeah. Here's my
Okay.
hands. Right, perfect.
His composure never changed. His refusal was firm, measured, and lawful. Yet that quiet resistance seemed to strike a nerve. Warnings followed. A countdown. The sidewalk became a fault line between authority and autonomy. Then came the escalation. The man was detained, handcuffed. His lawfully carried firearm was seized. He was escorted across the street, away from the crowd, away from scrutiny. Moments later, reality set in. Panhandling was not illegal. The sidewalk was public. No crime had been committed, but the encounter was already over. So cops involved in the incident were brought into the interrogation room. And today, we will look into the psychology behind this.
New Smyrna Beach Police Department, Office of Professional Standards. This will be a taped interview in reference to IA case number 2021-006. Today's date is Friday, December 24th, 2021, and the time is 7:03 p.m. The location of this interview is the Command Staff Conference Room at the New Smyrna Beach Police Department. Presently being interviewed is Sergeant Richard Kirkland. I am Lieutenant Mark Severance with the New Smyrna Beach Police Department. Are you aware this interview is being recorded?
I am.
As a Florida law enforcement officer in Notary Public of the State of Florida, I'm empowered to take sworn statements. At this time, I'd ask you to raise your right hand to be sworn, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the statement you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You are being interviewed as a witness to an internal affairs investigation. Since you are not the focus of the investigation, neither union representation or an attorney need be present to represent you. You are required to answer all questions pertaining to your actions or knowledge obtained while an employee of the City of New Smyrna Beach Police Department. Failure to answer any questions may subject you to departmental charges. If any time during this interview you feel that your answers might result in disciplinary action being taken against you, so advise me and the interview will be stopped until representation is obtained. Do you understand that?
I do.
Okay. So on December 14th, 2021, there was a CAD call asking for police to respond to 143 Canal Street in reference to a suspicious person. Are you familiar with that call?
I am.
Were you working as a Bravo shift supervisor that evening?
I was.
So you were filling in for another supervisor,
Yes,
correct?
I was on overtime. Correct.
Can you recall the details or circumstances of that suspicious person call?
Yes, I do.
Authority bias occurs when individuals overestimate the legitimacy and scope of their power simply because they occupy a position of authority. In this case, the officers behave as though their presence alone confers the right to command compliance, despite lacking legal justification. The repeated instructions to move along and demands for identification reflect an internal assumption that civilians must obey officers as a default rule. This bias suppresses constitutional analysis by replacing legal thresholds with hierarchical expectation. Once authority is presumed absolute, lawful resistance is reframed as insubordination, and constitutional limits are no longer actively considered in decision-making.
What were they?
The suspicious person call came out, was dispatched to Galt about a male bothering customers and asking for money. I don't know how far you want me to go. Galt responds, and that's the circumstances of the call. That's all we know as far as the call goes.
Okay, so to you, it was pretty nondescript, just a person
Correct.
Bothering customers.
Yes.
Okay. Were you ever contacted by Officer Galt or Officer Batty during the time frame of this call for service?
I was contacted by Officer Batty after the call for service, not during it. The subject had already left the scene by the time he called me, but yes.
Okay, so you had no knowledge of what was going on at the scene at the time when either Officer Galt was there or Officer Batty was there?
Correct. Yeah, I thought it was just a suspicious person. They were going to move along, or
Okay.
that was it.
So, you said Officer Batty calls you, you believe, at the end of his interaction
Correct.
with this person.
Yes.
Okay, can you describe the phone conversation that you had with Officer Batty?
Yeah, he said that he was just calling to inform me about what happened. He said that he was handling a panhandler call. So obviously, immediately I was kind of thinking, what do you mean by panhandler call? He says that the subject was standing on city property and had a sign that said, God bless homeless veterans. He said that the male was refusing to identify himself, and that he had a firearm, but he did have a valid concealed weapons permit. I asked him, what happened. He explains to me that basically he and Galt detained the male with handcuffs.
After receiving a complaint alleging panhandling, the officers anchor their perception of the situation to that allegation and selectively interpret subsequent information to support it. Calm denials, visible signage that does not request money, and the absence of customer complaints are discounted, while refusal to provide ID is treated as corroborative evidence. Confirmation bias narrows investigative focus, turning the interaction into a search for validation rather than truth. This cognitive distortion prevents officers from objectively reassessing the situation when the factual basis for suspicion fails to materialize.
They disarmed him and confirmed that he had a valid concealed weapons permit, and that in doing so they were able to identify him, and ultimately they let him go. I asked Beatty why he was detained, and he told me that he was detained because he was refusing to identify himself. And I said, well, for what crime are you investigating? And he said that he was investigating panhandling. And he said, it's against city ordinance. And I told him, no, it's not against city ordinance. And he said, well, it's against state statute as well. And I said, it's not against state statute. And I told him, I said that from what you're telling me, it sounds like you had no legal authority to seize the gentleman or his firearm, disarm him, even run his name. It doesn't sound like he was doing anything wrong.
What was Beatty's reaction to that on the phone?
He seemed kind of like taken back, like kind of shocked. Like he didn't, I don't think he grasped that I was telling him that it was not illegal. I think he truly thought it was illegal and was kind of stammering for a second. And then at one point hold on one second, let me refer to the report here. I forget, he did say something. He did try to tell me that that he didn't tell him about the concealed weapons permit at the same time he told him about the gun. So he was basically trying to paint the picture that, well, he told me he had a gun, so I was just going to seize the gun and make it more of an officer safety thing. And I told him that still does not work. If you don't have a crime to investigate, you can't seize the person.
When the subject asserts his rights and refuses to comply, the officers exhibit cognitive rigidity, a reduced ability to adapt thinking in response to new or conflicting information. Under stress, their mental framework becomes fixed around the initial assumption that panhandling is illegal. Even when that assumption is challenged verbally and contradicted by observable facts, the officers persist. This rigidity blocks corrective reasoning and transforms a fluid legal situation into a fixed enforcement mindset, making escalation psychologically easier than reassessment.
You can't seize the person. And it ultimately turned out the guy did tell him he had a concealed weapons permit anyway. So.
Okay, are you aware of the duration of this interaction, the call?
Well, the call came out at 19:27 hours, and I got the phone call at 19:57, so literally right at a half hour.
Okay.
From the time dispatch to the time Beatty's calling me. So I would say shorter, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Something.
Okay. Obviously, since you weren't there, you don't have a lot of details as to what happened based on the phone call that you got from Batty, other than what he told you. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, now, obviously, after the fact, I met with you, you being the supervisor that night, and asked you to conduct a supervisory inquiry. That was on the following day, December 15th. And you entered your findings into an incident summary and submitted it for further review. Can you provide a synopsis of the key findings in that document and walk us through what happened?
Sure. So the ultimate findings are that the gentleman was not creating a crime, or was not committing a crime. He was completely within his rights. He was on a public sidewalk, and he was simply holding a sign saying, "God bless the homeless vets." Wasn't doing anything illegal or suspicious for that matter. They did not have a right to detain him, to seize him, his property, or anything. That was my ultimate findings. The way I got to those findings is I reviewed all the video that was recorded by the subject and posted to social media. I also reviewed the both body-worn cameras from Officer Galt and Officer Beatty. Essentially, Officer Galt gets on scene first. He goes to make contact with the male. He tries to summon the male over to him. The male didn't really appear to respond, so he approaches the male, and they have a brief interchange where Officer Galt basically tries to get him to move along and tries to give him some. The male challenges him and says, "I don't have to move along." I don't know if you want me to get into exact words and stuff, or you just want me to kind of give the...
No, did Officer Galt make contact with the business owner or the manager?
Not until after he had this, verbal kind of back and forth with the subject.
Psychological reactance occurs when individuals perceive their authority or freedom to be challenged, triggering an impulse to reassert control. In this encounter, the officers experience reactance in response to the subject's refusal, but misattribute that emotional response to the subject's behavior rather than their own threatened authority. Instead of recognizing lawful autonomy, they label the behavior as defiant, justifying escalation. This misattribution shifts the encounter from a legal evaluation to a contest of control, increasing the likelihood of constitutional overreach.
I believe that he thought he was just going to walk up to the subject and ask him to move along, as we do on a lot of calls, and if the guy doesn't have a problem with it, moves along, no harm, no foul. Well, in this case, the gentleman says, I have a right to be here, I'm not going to. So you can see Galt kind of is taken back a little bit, and he said, okay, well, let me go in and talk to the manager. So he does go in and talk to the bar staff. He tells them, the guy says that he's not going to move and that, he's on the sidewalk. I believe the bar manager tells him, well, he was on our property, and
So there was some dispute over what was their property, what was public property.
Correct. It appeared from watching the video that the bar manager, the reporting party, that I believe his name is Axel, thought that the entire sidewalk belonged to their business. It clearly doesn't. It's a public sidewalk, and the subject was actually standing on the farthest away on the sidewalk he could be from the business. He was literally out by where the parallel parking is.
Okay, let's back up for a minute. In your review of the body-worn camera videos and the YouTube video, primarily the YouTube video, before our officers arrive, did you see the RP Axel speak with this subject?
Yes, he initially tries to handle this incident himself. He goes out and asks him to move along, tells him he can't be there, and of course the gentleman says that he can. He does have every right to be there. He's on a public sidewalk. The Axel guy kind of challenges him and says, "No, this is our sidewalk," and he said, "No, it's not." And basically, when he meets the resistance, Axel says, well, fine, I'll just have to call the police then. And so he goes back in the bar. And
okay, that brings us back to where we're at then. Yeah. And so Officer Galt talks to Axel inside the bar, and then what happens? He
also called for Officer Beatty to respond as backup. And he basically, the end of the conversation is, well, I'm just going to have to wait for my backup to get here. So he goes back outside. He again confronts the guy, and Officer Beatty comes up on scene. You can see Officer Beatty pull in. He parks across the street on a perpendicular road there. And
so when Officer Beatty arrives, what does Officer Galt do first?
He walks over to Beatty's car.
Action bias explains the tendency to favor action over inaction in uncertain situations, particularly among authority figures. Faced with ambiguity and an uncooperative subject, the officers feel compelled to do something rather than disengage. Detention becomes a psychological resolution to uncertainty, even though legally, disengagement is the appropriate response when no crime is present. The bias substitutes movement for judgment, allowing enforcement action to proceed without legal necessity.
And tells him, let me see here. Let's see exactly what they said. Give me 1 second. Okay. Officer Beatty pulls on scene. Galt explains that he's, as they're walking up to the subject, that the subject's saying it's his constitutional right to be stand where he's standing. At the manager of the business says one of his waitresses was afraid to go outside, and I guess wait on the tables. There's a couple tables outside. So that was literally what Galt told him.
Okay. So then what happens after they both approach the subject again?
So then Beatty kind of takes over the call at this point. He makes contact with the guy and does acknowledge and says that he's on a public sidewalk, but the business said that he was begging for money. Beatty had not made contact with the RP. He's just going off at this point of what was said in the CAD call from dispatch. So he said that panhandling is against the law and he can't be panhandling out there.
Okay.
the gentleman says that, he wasn't panhandling and that he was within his rights to be there. And do you want me to just...
Yes, continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ultimately the guy, or BD, tells the guy that, he can't be there and that he needs his name and information. The guy says that he's not going to identify himself. They go back and forth a few times. BD, basically tells him, threatens him that he's going to go to jail if he doesn't give him his identification, because he's there investigating a crime to which he claims the business started the complaint. So the male, I think, could see that he was going to be put into handcuffs, so he alerts the officers that, or at least he perceived he was going to be put into handcuffs, I should say. He alerts the officers that he is armed, and that he lawfully armed, he has a concealed weapons permit, and he kind of puts his arms out in front of him.
Okay.
Officer Beatty, and he makes it an exaggerated movement. He says, "Here's my hands out here." And Officer Beatty goes to, take the gun out of his pocket. I think that the male, maybe he felt a little uncomfortable with the officers taking the gun out of his pocket with his hands just being there.
Right.
So he actually suggests, "You guys, maybe I should be put in handcuffs." So then you see Officer Galt. That's when he comes in and puts the guy in handcuffs while Beatty's retrieving the firearm.
Both officers demonstrate unwarranted confidence in their understanding of panhandling laws, assuming illegality without verification. Overconfidence bias leads individuals to overestimate their competence in complex domains, reducing the likelihood of consulting available resources. This misplaced certainty discourages fact-checking and reinforces flawed decision-making. The belief that one already knows the law becomes a direct catalyst for unconstitutional enforcement.
And then ultimately searches the mail, locates, I believe, some magazines in another pocket, and that sort of thing. The male, during the detention and search, says, "I do not consent to any searches or seizures." He's told them several times that he's within his rights, and this is a violation of his rights. He was basically broadcasting that.
So after they handcuff him in front of the New Smyrna Brewery there, what happens?
Well, I forgot to note, as they were going to handcuff him, Officer Beatty takes his sign out of his hand and puts it on the pole. Yeah. I don't know if that really is of note, but ultimately they walk him across the street to where Officer Beatty parked his patrol car.
Okay.
Officer Beatty is explaining to him that this is the reason as to why he's getting arrested, or why he's been detained, I should say, not arrested.
Right.
And the guy says, "Well, since you have my firearm, I'll go ahead and let you get my concealed weapons permit." And he tells him it's in my wallet, in my pocket. He directs Beatty to the wallet and ultimately Beatty gets his concealed weapons permit. He uses that to identify him by name and date of birth. He runs him on teletype and confirms that he's not wanted. He doesn't run the concealed weapons permit number to verify that it's valid.
Okay.
But he does verify that the male is not wanted. So he uses that to say, "Okay, now since you've identified yourself, I'm going to let you go." Basically, that's when they unsecure him. Beatty actually hands him his firearm back and tells him to put it in his pocket. Again, you can see the subject's kind of uncomfortable with that, but ultimately he does take the gun, put it in his pocket, and again pronounces his hand movement, saying, I think he put it up on the police car, so I'm gonna leave my hand right here. And then Beatty went to go make contact with the business.
Okay. So Beatty goes into the business and makes contact with the manager, Axel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you describe that interaction?
Script theory explains behavior guided by learned sequences rather than situational reasoning. The officers follow a familiar policing script. Initial contact, request identification, escalate upon refusal. This script assumes compliance as the expected civilian response. When the subject deviates from the script by asserting rights, officers do not adapt. Instead, they intensify enforcement. The script overrides contextual analysis, causing officers to treat lawful resistance as procedural disruption requiring correction.
Let me
you can refer to your report.
Beatty asks if he immediately asked the manager, was the male seen asking for money? And the bar manager said, no, I don't think he was asking for money, but he was, reiterates that one of his waitresses was nervous to go outside or whatever. Beatty then says immediately that he's going to call the sergeant, me, to kind of, I guess, run it by me. But if he was not on their property, not asking for money, there wasn't much that he could do. He couldn't make him leave. So he kind of was telling the guy, if he's not asking for money, then we have no law violation, and I can't make him move along or anything.
Okay.
In his mind is what he was thinking. Leaves and goes back to the car. I forgot to mention, actually, let me go back.
Okay.
When they escorted him over to the car, the guy did make a statement. He said, I just want to put you guys on notice that you're violating my constitutional rights, and that I would proceed, or if I were you, I would proceed with caution from here forward, something to those lines. And Beatty, kind of argues with him and tells him, no, we're not violating your rights because you were panhandling, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, Beatty comes back over, and the guy's already unhandcuffed as before. He's got his gun. He tells him, since you weren't panhandling and asking for money, and I already identified you, basically that he wasn't going to be detained any further. And the guy asked if he was free to leave. He had originally asked for a card from Beatty. Beatty said he would go get him a card, and he goes in the car. That's actually when Beatty calls me, and the subject, I think, was kind of almost maybe tired of waiting, and he asked Officer Galt for what their names were, and then he just says, I don't need a card, I'll just leave, and then he walks away.
As the encounter unfolds, officers face increasing evidence that no crime has occurred. Acknowledging this would conflict with their self-image as competent, lawful professionals. To reduce cognitive dissonance, they rationalize continued detention rather than disengage. Escalation becomes a psychological strategy to preserve internal consistency, maintaining the belief that their actions are justified, even as objective legality erodes.
Okay, going back to Officer Galt, if I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
If Officer Galt had not called Officer Batty to come to the scene, what do you think would have happened?
It appeared to me that Officer Galt kind of knew he was in over his head. I don't think he really knew how to proceed. That's why he called for backup. I think he was relying on a more senior officer to kind of guide him on what to do. If he did not do that, I would like to think that he would have called me and or the corporal, one or the other. Actually, there was no corporal working that night, so call me for advice on how to proceed.
Okay.
I don't see Officer Galt going to the extent that Officer Beatty did on his own. He clearly had that opportunity several times. He went back into the business, I think, twice. He wasn't forcing the issue at all.
Did he talk to any customers outside about what was going on? Do you recall?
Yeah, he there was one customer that said he had been out there the whole time, and I think he asked him. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he asked him if he saw him asking for money, and the guy said no. He's just been there the whole time.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look at the video. Nothing that really jumps out at me, but yeah, I think he did.
Let me back up here. Did Officer Galt ever mention anything about panhandling? Do you recall that? At the beginning of his interaction with the subject?
Let me look at my report here.
Okay.
He did. He tells him, the subject tells Officer Galt that he's on the public sidewalk and is just saying, God bless the homeless vets. Galt tells him that he cannot stand in the same place and say the same thing over and over. Then goes on to tell him that he cannot beg for money because it's against city ordinance.
Okay.
The male told Galt that he was not begging for money and that it would still be illegal because that city ordinance would be unconstitutional if it existed.
The arrival of additional officers intensifies the situation through group polarization. Shared assumptions, such as the belief that panhandling is illegal, are reinforced within a group, amplifying confidence in enforcement. Rather than introducing caution, collective agreement accelerates escalation. Each officer's certainty is strengthened by the presence of others, pushing the group toward a more extreme response than any one officer might have chosen independently.
And that's why he was ultimately going to detain him. It kind of took a weird turn because Batty went for the gun immediately instead of going for handcuffs immediately, and then the male ultimately asked to be handcuffed.
Right.
So it was, but I do think that he was absolutely going down that path. That's what he was going to do.
Okay. Can you summarize the policy violation? You proffered a couple of policy violations. The one, can you read that from the record there? The group 2.
The group 2M, violation of rules, orders, etc., issued by the city commission. It's basically he violated our rules and policies and procedures, regulations by ultimately going against what he did for preliminary and follow-up investigations. He basically detained someone without the legal authority to do so. So clearly in violation of that policy. As far as Officer Galt, I do think that he also had a duty to recognize that what was going on was not okay. But again, I think he was naive and ignorant to the fact that panhandling is not against the law, and we cannot enforce a panhandling complaint by detaining people. So I think that they were operating under the impression that what they were doing was correct, but were just misinformed.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you straight. Are you of the opinion that Officer Batty and Officer Galt violated this subject's civil rights based on your review of the video evidence?
Yes, they absolutely did. Again, I don't think it was intentional or malicious. I think that they thought what they were doing was right, and that it just simply wasn't the case.
Okay, do you have anything further you'd like to add to this?
No, I don't think so.
As multiple officers become involved, responsibility for constitutional compliance becomes psychologically diluted. Each officer assumes that someone else is monitoring legality, reducing personal accountability. This diffusion lowers the likelihood that any individual will intervene to halt escalation. The result is a collective failure where unconstitutional actions persist not because of malicious intent, but because responsibility is shared and therefore avoided.
Okay, for the record, please state your name, rank, and current duty assignment.
Officer Brett Galt, patrol officer.
What shift do you work?
Bravo shift.
Bravo shift. Okay. Have you reviewed the USB drive files, documents, recorded interviews, YouTube videos, BWC videos, the Central Dispatch radio and phone calls I provided you on Monday, December 27th, 2021?
Yes, sir.
Okay, before we go on, I'd like to say that obviously everything that on this particular incident was captured either on the subject's video, YouTube videos that have been posted, as well as your BWC and Officer Batty's BWC. So, as we talk about these questions and stuff, if you say something that isn't exactly what you said on the video, that's not an issue. The issue, we want to get to the core of it, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, at approximately 1927 hours on Tuesday, December 14th, 2021, were you dispatched to a call for service identified as a suspicious person, call number P2134-82050 at the New Smyrna Brewery located at 143 Canal Street?
Yes.
Did you read the call notes while en route to the call?
Yes.
What did they tell you?
The call note started out saying that there was a male dressed in all black, black shirt, black jacket, and originally he was asking for money from people outside there, and that's all I read because I was right around the corner from the scene, so I didn't want to get there, and that's what dispatch advised what was going on over the radio.
Okay. So what crime were you intending to investigate there?
Well, at that point, they said that he was at or in the business asking for money, and the business owner just wanted him to be moved along, and they didn't want anything to happen to him. But at that point, he was in the business asking people for money.
Officer Galt demonstrates moral licensing rooted in his professional identity as a law enforcement officer. Because he perceives himself as acting in the role of a protector and problem solver, he unconsciously grants himself ethical latitude to bend procedural rules. This explains why he believes relocating and detaining Mr. Gray was justified to avoid a scene, even without legal grounds. The moral self-image of being a responsible officer temporarily licenses unconstitutional behavior.
Do they call that panhandling or asking for money is what is said in the call notes?
Yes.
Is panhandling a crime or a city ordinance violation?
It's not a city ordinance violation.
Okay. Upon your arrival on scene, what did you observe?
A black male, or not a white male dressed in all black, standing on the sidewalk, behind the car, holding a sign and walking back and forth up and down the sidewalk.
Okay. When you made contact with, we'll call him Mr. Gray because we ultimately did identify him during the encounter. Can you describe the interaction you had with him?
I was just trying to be like people, like I am on most calls, just trying to get to know who he was, what his purpose was there. He was really blunt, not like straight up, not like asking or answering my just questions, just normal questions I had. Just what are you doing there? Is there a purpose you're up here? Stuff like that. He was just keeping to himself at that point.
Okay. What did he tell you he was doing?
That he was just whatever the sign was like. God bless the homeless vets. He was just trying to make people aware that God needs to bless the homeless vets.
Okay.
And he just kept going on that topic.
Where was he at when you first encountered him?
On the sidewalk, by the car, by the light post.
By the curb?
Yeah.
Where the car's parked?
Yeah.
Okay.
Galt shows high confidence that departmental norms align with constitutional legality. This reflects a psychological reliance on institutional trust, the belief that if something feels routine within policing culture, it must be lawful. His repeated assertion that he thought there was an ordinance illustrates how institutional familiarity replaces independent legal verification. This bias is especially dangerous in discretionary enforcement contexts.
Why did you ask Mr. Gray to move along or leave the area?
The business owner said initially saying that he was asking his customers for money. He just didn't want him up front of his business.
Okay. What was Mr. Gray's response?
He said he wasn't going to move. He said he has the right to be there, and he didn't feel like moving along.
Okay. Was he holding a sign that said God bless the homeless vets?
Yes.
Why did you ask Mr. Gray for identification or to otherwise identify himself?
It's usually on calls that we go to, we try and identify everyone, and I was just trying to get to know who he was, just so I can identify him and say that I made contact with this man in front of this business, and the business owner just wanted him moved along at that point.
So what did Mr. Gray tell you?
That he was not going to provide ID.
Okay. Did he tell you anything about himself or?
He said his first name was Jeff.
Okay. Was there any dispute over what was public property or sidewalk or what was owned by the business?
Further down the investigation, yeah, the business owner was not aware of what his boundaries were of the sidewalk. We later found that out.
Okay.
He wasn't aware of what the line was.
Who wasn't aware?
The business owner.
Okay. So that kind of leads into my next question.
Mm-hmm.
At this location, did you know what was public property and what was business property? Roughly.
Yeah. I could imagine that any certain feet off the curb is still owned by the city due to being public road, and then the public sidewalk, obviously, and then whatever the business had, the benches were, I was assuming was the business.
Okay.
Rather than directly assessing legality, Galt substitutes a simplified heuristic. Complaint plus refusal plus tension equals lawful detention. He replaces the complex legal inquiry, is there reasonable suspicion, with an emotional shortcut. This feels like a problem. Heuristic substitution enables quick action, but sacrifices legal precision, something Galt later acknowledges when conceding that no crime existed.
Property.
All right. Why did you tell Mr. Gray that asking for money is technically against city ordinance?
At that point, I thought panhandling was a city ordinance violation.
Okay, so it was your belief that it was?
Yes, sir.
Where did you get that?
I thought that early on in training that we had a call, and there was people asking for money, and I thought that we looked up a city ordinance violation that was panhandling, and it's not a city ordinance violation. It's a state statute actually. So
For what's the state statute refer to?
like if you're blocking, like stepping out in traffic, blocking people's right to move.
So it's a 316 violation for some type of impediment of traffic.
Right.
If
It's a
you're
traffic violation.
soliciting or entering traffic patterns, right? That wasn't the case here, was it?
No.
Okay. Did you speak with the reporting party inside the business?
I did.
So describe your conversation with him.
I asked him, I was like, hey, just give me a rundown what's going on. He initially was like, oh, he was up talking to people at the table, asking them for money, and then when my waitress went out, he went on to say that he was harassing her, and he wouldn't go into detail of that, and the waitress didn't want to go into detail about that either.
Okay.
So at that point, I went back out, and
you re-engaged Mr. Gray.
I did, yes. I asked him about that.
Right. So at this point in your investigation, did you have any reasonable or articulable suspicion that Mr. Gray was committing, or was about to commit a crime or a violation of city ordinance?
At that point, I believed he might have been asking people for money due to him not answering my questions. So that's why I went back out and re-engaged with him. I thought we had something maybe stirring up.
So at this point, you're still thinking panhandling is a city ordinance
Yes.
violation,
Yes.
and you're acting on that assumption
Yes.
to try to continue the investigation.
Yes.
Okay.
Once Galt commits verbally to the belief that panhandling is illegal and that detention is appropriate, he continues escalating despite contradictory evidence. Escalation of commitment explains why disengagement becomes psychologically difficult. Backing down would require admitting error mid-interaction, threatening both professional self-esteem and perceived authority.
Who did you call on the phone when you went inside the business?
I called Officer.
And what did you tell him?
I said that, hey, we have the business owner is stating that this is what's going on, and the male is not answering any questions. And at that point, I was just going for maybe a senior officer to come and try to help me work through the situation.
Okay. So you told him some of the details of what was happening?
Yeah, I told him what the business owner just told me, and that at this point, I just need someone else to kind of hear the stories and work through it and see what we have.
Okay, so when Officer Batty arrived, did you go meet him?
I did, yes. I
And-
gave him a rundown of what was going on and what
Okay.
the business owner told me and what the male was actively doing at that point.
Okay, can you describe Officer Batty's initial contact with Mr. Gray?
He was asking him the kind of the same questions I was, kind of starting over the process. And then when he didn't want to identify himself, that's when he kind of went, instead of talking to the business owner, he kind of went hands-on with Mr. Gray. And at that point, I usually, like when we investigate other crimes and stuff like that, we listen to both sides of the stories, come back, talk to each other. And I don't know where that happened, maybe because he was frustrated with him.
Do you think that would have been a more prudent course of action to continue the investigation and figure out what's going on?
I do, yes.
Did you hear Officer Batty tell Mr. Gray that if he didn't identify himself, he was going to go to jail?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Galt experiences anxiety when his authority is challenged in a public setting. Mr. Gray's calm refusal and legal awareness undermine Galt's sense of control. This activates authority maintenance behavior, physical detention, and command assertion, designed to restore dominance. The anxiety stems not from danger, but from the perceived loss of command presence.
After reviewing everything, all the body-worn camera videos, his videos, the YouTube videos, documents and stuff, would you like to make a statement about what you know?
Like about the whole situation.
Yeah,
I definitely think that that's why when I was on scene, I didn't go hands-on. I didn't tell him he was detained. I didn't say any of that. I didn't ask him if he had any weapon on him. And at that point, there just wasn't like a big idea in my head for me. That's why I called for Officer Beatty. I know he's had a couple years on the road, so he's the senior officer to me, my zone partner. I called him, and I definitely think that when he got there, that the course of action he took probably was not the best one, because he wasn't able to get both sides of the story. And I kind of wish that we would have went back and had him talk to the business owner, and then have him talk to me. I was like, hey, this is what the business owner told me. What did he tell you?
Right.
Like, what do we have here now? And I think that we skipped over that step, and he went straight to going hands-on with him instead of going through the business owner, see what we have, and then coming back to me and saying, hey, this is what he told me.
Okay.
And kind of see the differences and see if we can work out with the business owner what was going on.
So you calling him to the scene, if I understand you correctly, you were counting on his experience to try to help resolve this situation.
I was, yes.
Okay. In your view now, in retrospect, do you believe panhandling is a crime or a city ordinance violation?
No.
Do you believe that carrying a sign that says "God bless the homeless vets" on a public sidewalk, is there any crime or violation there?
No, sir.
During the administrative interview, Galt acknowledges that he should have done things differently. This reflects hindsight bias. Once legal standards are clarified, the correct course of action appears obvious. However, this bias obscures how real-time cognitive pressures, assumptions, and authority stress impair judgment at the moment.
Is there any crime or violation by a person that's carrying a concealed weapon lawfully with a concealed weapons permit?
No, sir, as long as it's valid.
Okay. So going back, what would you do different?
I'd probably go back in and kind of work through that myself, honestly. Go back to the business owner, be like, hey, this is what we have, this is what's going on, and probably just work that scene by myself. If he didn't want to identify himself, that's his right. Would have been like, hey, just to let you know, the business owner doesn't want you up in front of him. You're allowed to be on the sidewalk. This is a public sidewalk, but he doesn't want you talking to any employees and anything like that. And at that point, I probably just let the matter be.
So if this gentleman continued to refuse and wasn't committing any violation, you would have what?
I probably would have got back in my car and contacted the supervisor to tell him, hey, this is what was going on, this is what we have.
Okay.
Just let you know that this dude matching like this description was out in the street, and just in case of a further incident occurred on Canal later that night.
Okay.
We could at least know that we were in contact with a male matching that description.
Okay. Do you think it would have been a good idea on your way to the call to check if a city ordinance existed for panhandling?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything else to add?
No, sir.
Unlike deceptive criminal suspects, Galt does not fabricate or evade facts. Instead, his cognition realigns under structured accountability. As the investigator anchors questions to policy language, video evidence, and sworn obligations, Galt's rationalizations weaken. This reflects cognitive realignment under accountability pressure, where defensiveness gives way to acceptance once denial is no longer sustainable.
I believe that the call note says that he was panhandling on private property, but not at this time.
Okay. I think it said he was asking customers for money in front of the business and harassing customers, something to that effect. Okay. When you arrived at the scene, did Officer Galt meet with you and provide you information concerning the call before you spoke with the subject?
I believe I parked across the street.
Okay.
And as I walked across the street, we met halfway.
What did he tell you?
To my recollection, he just said that he wasn't cooperating, and I don't really think he said anything else besides that.
Okay. When you made contact with Mr. Gray, you confirmed that he was on a public sidewalk and told him the business said he was asking for money and that they had every right to have him move along. Is that correct?
I did.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. Is asking for money or another way to call it, panhandling, in a public place, public sidewalk, is that a crime or a city ordinance violation?
To my knowledge now.
No, I want you to tell me what were you thinking.
When I came to the scene, when I came on a scene, I did think we had a city ordinance. I swore we had a city ordinance.
Okay.
That you weren't allowed to panhandle. Even more so, because I could have sworn that I've been told to enforce that on right underneath the Martin Luther King Bridge on the Lytle extension.
Okay.
I've been corrected since then.
Okay. Well,
Batty repeatedly states that he was 100% sure panhandling was a city ordinance violation. This illustrates overconfidence bias, where familiarity with past enforcement situations creates an illusion of mastery. The bias discourages verification, even though Batty had access to Muni Code, supervisors, and dispatch clarification. False certainty becomes the foundation for unlawful detention.
let me ask you this. I know what you're talking about under the MLK. That's FDOT property. There is a Florida statute, 316-2045, I think, that deals with impeding traffic. It doesn't deal with what they're doing to impede traffic.
Right.
That's a statute, and under the bridge there, we have had FDOT trespass authority for that property, and it's my understanding, we've trespassed people from there and have maybe even made arrests for trespass after warning. Even though they were panhandling, they weren't arrested for panhandling, they were arrested for trespass after warning. Okay. All right. So, you went on to say let me go back. The subject was subsequently identified as Jeffrey Gray. So I'm just going to call him Mr. Gray from this point on. Okay. You went on to say that because you're there, and they called about Mr. Gray, that we have to identify him. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was Mr. Gray's response?
He pulled out refrigerator magnets out of his pocket.
What were they?
I and a D.
So that was his ID.
That was his ID.
Okay. Did you tell him that if he does not provide ID identification, that he would go to jail?
Yes.
Why?
Because at the time I thought we had a crime.
Officer Batty consistently operates under the assumption that his authority alone legitimizes compliance. His belief that Mr. Gray had to identify simply because police were called reflects authority bias, where individuals overestimate the scope of their power due to their role. This bias substitutes hierarchical expectation for legal justification, causing Batty to treat lawful resistance as improper conduct rather than a constitutional right.
I had the manager was standing right next to us, and he was saying that his waitresses were scared to come out and that they felt threatened and that he was on private property asking for money. And what I should have done was investigated that first,
Okay.
before detaining him and moving him across the street.
Okay.
Because when I went back and asked the manager more particulars about what he was talking about, I believe it's my BWC video. I explained the whole thing to him. I'm like, none of that is illegal.
Okay. We'll cover that a little bit later as well. So up to this point, when you asked for ID, up to this point in your investigation, did you have any reasonable or articulable suspicion that Mr. Gray was committing, or was about to commit a crime or violation of city ordinance?
I did.
What crime were you thinking of?
That he was either trespassing or assault, but that's just based off of what the manager was saying. He was saying that his waitresses were being threatened, or felt threatened.
Okay. Yeah, I don't recall hearing anything about that from the person, but like I said, I'm not going to go over the video line by line about what was said, but it's a matter of record already. So, is holding a cardboard sign saying "God bless the homeless vets" on a public sidewalk or asking for money or panhandling a crime or city ordinance violation?
No.
You've learned that since this incident?
Well,
right.
For the panhandling part.
Okay.
I knew everything else was not.
Okay, so holding the sign on a public sidewalk, no issue, right?
No.
It didn't say anything about money or anything. Okay. Did Mr. Gray ask if he was being detained?
Yes,
What did you tell him?
that he was.
Can you tell me why you decided to detain Mr. Gray?
Well, there was in front of a restaurant that was open and full, and I didn't want to make the scene because he was being not aggressive, just argumentative and defiant. So I wanted to take him across the street so that we can figure out what was going on without creating more of a scene
Okay.
in front of the restaurant.
Batty explicitly states that he detained Mr. Gray to avoid making a scene in front of a crowded restaurant. Psychologically, this reflects conflict avoidance behavior, using coercive control to manage environmental discomfort. Rather than tolerate lawful but inconvenient speech, Batty chooses enforcement to restore social order, prioritizing calm over rights.
So at this point, you're still under the impression that you're acting under your authority.
I 100% thought we had a city ordinance.
As you moved to detain Mr. Gray, did he tell you that he was armed lawfully and had a concealed weapons permit?
No. Yes and no. He said he was armed. He said that he was armed, but he didn't say anything about the concealed weapons permit, so we got across.
Well, I have to correct you on that, because if you watch the video, he does say, I'm armed, pauses for a second, lawfully, and I have a concealed weapons permit,
Okay.
as you were taking the sign from him. So that's a matter of record. That's what was said,
Yeah,
okay?
I'm not arguing with
Okay.
it. That's just my recollection.
Okay.
But
Why did you seize the firearm before he was secured in handcuffs, or at all, if he was only being detained pending further investigation?
well, at that point, because I thought he was committing a crime, otherwise I want to put him in handcuffs, that he's resisting without violence. I'm trying to conduct an investigation, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. He doesn't want to identify himself, so that's why I detained him. And if I'm detaining somebody, I'm not going to leave a weapon on them. If they're being lawfully detained, I wouldn't want to leave a weapon on them.
Okay, but wouldn't it be more prudent to handcuff him first and then deal with the weapon issue if you
I
felt
wasn't
compelled to do
handcuffing
that? Well, he was being handcuffed.
Right.
That had not been done yet, and you were already diving in his pockets.
Okay.
So, okay. All right. Why did you tell him his attorney is a court thing and not a police thing? Can you explain that?
We're not required to have an attorney present during our questioning. We're either conducting an investigation or we're conducting Miranda warning questioning, which
Well, if he's invoking his right to have an attorney present,
he doesn't have to speak.
true.
But I mean, I'm not calling you as a lawyer to
Right.
come to the scene of
Okay.
the crime.
Once Batty verbally commits to the belief that a crime is occurring, he continues escalating. Detention, seizure of the firearm, relocation, despite emerging evidence to the contrary. Escalation of commitment explains why disengagement feels psychologically harder than doubling down, as retreat would signal error and loss of authority.
After you walk him across the street, did he advise you that you were violating his civil rights and to proceed cautiously?
Yes.
What was your response to that? Do you recall?
I don't recall.
Okay. After removing his handcuffs, did you again tell him that panhandling was against city ordinance?
Pretty sure I did.
Okay.
Panhandling on private property, I believe is what I said.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Did you speak with the reporting party inside the business?
Yes.
Can
Not
you,
inside the business, it was in the front porch.
can you describe your conversation with him?
I just asked him what he was complaining about, what was the problem with the mail, and he said that he was begging for money or asking customers for money on private property, and he said that he was standing in the same spot where I made contact with him at. So I went and explained to him that that wasn't private property, that was public.
So in his mind, there was a dispute over what the business owned and what was public
So
property.
he pointed out that he thought he owned all the way up to where there's the curb. Basically, it's a large curb that hits like the telephone or the light poles.
Right.
That he thought he owned all that, and I pointed out to him down the street that Jason's corner
Right.
has a canopy that stops at their line,
Right.
which
So-
is a crease in the concrete.
So in liberal sense of the terms, their little sidewalk cafes where their tables are sort of could be construed that that's the business property, or they're allowed to conduct business there, and then the rest of it is the public sidewalk.
Which
Would you agree?
is pretty clearly, I mean, it's, the sidewalk was built, and then there's concrete between the building and the sidewalk. So it's all one big piece of sidewalk, but you can see a line that goes straight down the side, and I explained that to him.
Okay.
Mr. Gray's calm defiance and legal awareness trigger authority maintenance anxiety. Batty's actions suggest discomfort not with danger, but with loss of control in a public setting. Detention becomes a mechanism to restore command presence rather than address criminal behavior.
To who?
The manager that was outside.
All right. So I heard you explain it to Mr. Gray later as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. After speaking with the business employee, the manager, Axel's his name, was there evidence that any crime or city ordinance had been committed at that point?
No.
So your investigation resulted in that there was no crime, even assuming that your assumption that panhandling was a crime.
Correct.
Okay.
He actually, when I asked him why, 'cause we get told that all the time, he threatened me or she threatened me.
Right.
And so you ask what that is, and he said, well, he didn't really say anything to my waitress. She just is afraid to come back outside now because he's here.
Okay.
And I said, well, that's not on him.
Right.
He's allowed to be where he's at.
Okay.
And
Fair enough.
that's when I was done.
Did you call Sergeant Kirkland after the fact to advise him of the incident?
Yes.
Can you describe what his response was to you?
He immediately said, well, you violated every right he has.
Okay. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation on the phone, but what do you mean by that? I mean,
That's just what he said. I told him what went down. I told him, the manager's saying this, and he's being defiant. So to get space between the manager and him, we detained him for the investigation, brought him over to my car, and then he's like, well, I hope he doesn't make a big deal out of this because you just, I don't know if he said what amendment, but he's like, you just violated his rights.
okay. I want to discuss with you a little bit about the Policy and Procedure Directive 15-2.
Batty initially minimizes the seriousness of his actions because nothing bad happened and Mr. Gray was released. Outcome bias leads him to judge conduct by result rather than legality. The interrogation systematically dismantles this bias by refocusing on process violations, not harm avoided.
The DMS record shows that you signed this off on 9/19 of 2020. Okay. This was published in, a revision of it was published in 9 of 20. So when the revision came out, you had reviewed it and signed it. Specifically, the section that we're talking about is 15.2.17, investigated detentions. It says, an officer is permitted to stop and briefly detain a person for investigative purposes if the officer has a reasonable suspicion supported by articulable facts that criminal activity may be afoot, even if the officer lacks probable cause. Such encounters must be evaluated by considering the totality of the circumstances. Investigative detention should last no longer than is necessary to effectuate the purpose of the stop. The investigative methods employed should be the least intrusive means reasonably available to verify or dispel the officer's suspicion in a short period of time. Any investigative detention must conform to current law. I want to bring your attention that one of the current law that's applicable here is one of the attachments here. Well, there's several attachments, but the one I'm going to reference is Florida Statute 901-151, which is Florida Stop and Frisk Law. Okay. Are you familiar with that?
We just read it.
Okay. So that being said, based on the facts of this incident as reviewed in this investigation, do you feel that you violated Policy and Procedure Directive 15-2 regarding that investigative detention?
At the time, I did not. Looking back at it and being peeled apart, yes, I should have investigated further, and if he wasn't going to move off the sidewalk, he doesn't have to move off the sidewalk. We could have taken the investigation inside the establishment, since they were the complainant anyways, and figured out what went down. And then afterwards I find out that Galt had already done all this, but I wasn't made aware of any of it.
As evidence mounts that no crime occurred, Batty experiences cognitive dissonance between his self-image as a professional officer and the reality of constitutional violation. His explanations, "I thought I had a crime, I would have done it differently," serve to reduce internal conflict while preserving professional identity.
Knowing what you know now, that the investigation has bared out, like I told you at the very beginning, the record is undisputed of what was said, what was done, and by everyone involved on video and audio. So knowing all that, and knowing now that there isn't any panhandling ordinance, there was no crime being committed, the investigation bore that out. If I'm understanding you right, with that fact, would you agree that the intent of the investigative detention was violated?
Yes.
Okay.
But if I had the knowledge that I have now, I would have never done that call would have went completely different.
Well, you have resources to tap into that knowledge. One, you can call your supervisor, right? Always. Two, you have access to MuniCode via your computer. You could check and see if panhandling is a violation or an ordinance before you even get there. Property issues can be checked on the property appraiser's website. Have you ever used that?
Yeah.
For property lines?
I mean, I knew the property lines.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm not disputing the fact that I should have investigated prior to.
And I want to make it clear that this subject had no obligation to identify himself.
Absolutely not. He wasn't committing a crime.
Right.
He knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't. I thought he was.
Okay.
Once policy and law are clearly articulated during the interview, Batty expresses that the correct course of action now seems obvious. This hindsight bias masks how stress, assumptions, and authority pressure impaired real-time judgment, reframing systemic error as situational mistake.
In retrospect, after reviewing your actions during this incident, would you like to make a statement or add anything else to the record?
I think my record speaks for itself, and the community as a whole would testify on my behalf that this is what he's putting on video is not my normal actions. This is not how I conduct myself. I don't handcuff people and detain them illegally. I thought I had a crime, and therefore I thought I had the right to detain him because he wasn't IDing himself. So that when I had the crime, it would have been resisting, but I could have just left him there to himself, told him to keep his hands out of his pockets. Galt was there. Galt could just stood by while I did more investigating.
Okay.
I know what I should have. In looking hindsight, I see where I went wrong.
Okay.
But this is by no means the way I do business. I'm probably one of the more professional people in this department.
Okay. I just want to, the last thing I want to add is that, he was not committing a crime. Obviously, the facts bear that out. And you could have done things a lot differently. I appreciate your candor in answering the questions to the best of your ability. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. This is still an ongoing investigation, so I'm going to ask you not to speak with anyone else about this except your union rep or a personal representative of your choice. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm going to terminate recording at this time.
In his closing statements, Batty emphasizes that this incident is not how I do business and appeals to community reputation. This reflects identity protective cognition, defending moral self-concept when confronted with accountability. Admission is framed as error, not character flaw, allowing acceptance of fault without identity collapse. From a legal perspective, the detective's interrogation achieves its core objective, locking the officers into sworn, consistent admissions that establish the absence of reasonable suspicion. By anchoring testimony to policy text, video evidence, and the officer's own training acknowledgments, the detective eliminates ambiguity and forecloses later defenses based on mistake or discretion. Crucially, the officers concede that panhandling was not illegal, that refusal to identify was lawful, and that detention exceeded permissible limits. These admissions create a clear, evidentiary record of constitutional violation. While criminal charges may not follow, the interrogation decisively supports civil liability, internal discipline, and suppression of any enforcement justification, meeting the legal threshold for accountability. The case remains pending and has not resulted in a final criminal sentence. While the incident triggered internal affairs investigations, public scrutiny, and extensive legal analysis regarding constitutional violations, no court has issued a definitive judgment imposing incarceration, probation, or fines on the civilian involved. Instead, the matter continues to exist within ongoing legal and administrative channels, where questions of civil liability, departmental accountability, and potential policy violations are still being evaluated.